The Okanagan Sun remain undefeated. The West Shore Rebels and the Vancouver Island Raiders, with wins, remain locked in second place in the British Columbia Football Conference with 3-1 records. Hey guys, Dominic Abassi here for the BCFC. And I know we're supposed to be looking ahead to Week 5, but I have to look back and acknowledge some performances from Week 4 that were just incredible. Okanagan Sun defensive back Aldrich Barrios recording four interceptions in one game by the same player. Just incredible. Second most interceptions in a single game in Canadian Junior Football League history. Trey Campbell of the West Shore Rebels just coming back off of injury for the Rebels home opener, and he absolutely goes off. 265 yards worth of offense on 21 touches, 3 touchdowns as well. He's a dynamic running back, and those numbers are just incredible. Against the Langley Rams as well, and no slouch of an opponent. And in Nanaimo, Quinton Bowles of the Raiders tying a CJFL record for most sacks in a single game 5 times. He got to the Kamloops Broncos backfield. And then Bryson Mayo, just an incredible game in the return department, also on offense as a receiver as well. He had 402 all-purpose yards, one of the best single-game performances in Canadian Junior Football League history. He also had the second longest play in CJFL history and the longest play in BCFC history, a 128-yard missed field goal return. You have to see that video. It's up at the BC Football Conference Facebook page. Just incredible, and really just an example of the kind of athletes that are competing every single week in the BCFC. Some of the best performances in the history of the Canadian game you can come out and witness. It's pretty special stuff happening right now. Now for Week 5. The final week of action before the teams head into the Labor Day midseason bye week. We'll start with, unfortunately, the least compelling game of the week. The Valley Huskers traveling to West Shore. The Rebels offense had a nice day against the Rams. 363 yards of offense. I would expect that number to be significantly higher this weekend. This should be a pretty fun game for Charlie Kartalickia to call and be able to deploy maybe some different players from his offense. Now, despite the numbers and the record for the Valley Huskers, I do have to hand it to head coach Bob Reist. He's saying all the right things. I love his attitude when I talk to him. I really respect the approach that he's taking to really what is an inherited situation that is very difficult, but he's pressing forward. He's preaching trust the process, and I think that process will lead to some positive things for this franchise as long as his players continue to buy into it as things play along. That game gets going 3 o'clock Saturday at West Hill Stadium in Langford. Another week, another massive game for the Langley Rams. Head coach Kerry Joseph, in my conversations with him, has really downplayed the slow start to the season for the Rams, a surprisingly slow start off to a 1-3 out of the gates here. He's saying it's how you finish that matters. And now that is true, but the Rams have lost to the Raiders, the Rebels, and the Sun, the 3 best teams in the league right now. They've lost twice at home, and there's been a couple of chances in big games to prove something, to step up and say something. They haven't done that yet this season. And that's the question I have. When will the Rams step up in one of these big games? It's a huge one this weekend as they'll travel to Kamloops to take on the Broncos. The winner of this game will put a pretty good grip on 4th place in the standings and that final playoff spot, but the loser, they're going to go into the bye week well out of a playoff spot, and I think that would be more shocking and maybe harder to take from a Langley perspective than a Kamloops perspective. And for the Broncos, boy, they should be fresh because, let's be honest, they only played about 30 minutes in Nanaimo last weekend. Really kind of confusing with this team on what they're all about because they were stride for stride with the Raiders in the first half of the game, showed explosiveness, Max Joseph with a punt return touchdown. And then the second half was, quite frankly, a bit of a nightmare. Mistakes, fumbles, losing onside kicks, unable to move the ball on offense, and ended up being a really tough week for the Broncos. So they should be pretty motivated to try and rebound from that. Now, neither one of these offenses broke 200 yards last week, so it could be one of those defensive struggles, maybe a big play, a special teams play, turning things. That game gets going 6 o'clock at Hillside Stadium on Saturday. Finally, a classic rivalry matchup, a couple of BCFC perennial powerhouses going head-to-head as the Okanagan Sun travel to Nanaimo to take on the Raiders. First place is on the line here. If the Raiders win and the Rebels take care of their business, we would go into the bye week with 3 teams tied at 4-1 in the standings, and that would be pretty cool. I know the Okanagan Sun don't think that would be very much fun. They want to go into the break as the only undefeated team. A big focus for me on the line of scrimmage in this game, the Sun front seven has pounded opposition running games this season, and despite big numbers last week against the Broncos, the Raiders' running game hasn't looked overly dynamic, at least not consistently so far this season. That's going to put some pressure on Raiders quarterback Jake LaBerge. Will he have time to pass? And will he be able to perform throwing what I would assume might be a lot of passes in this game if that running game doesn't get moving? A few other questions. Can the Sun contain Bryson Mayo? Very few people have this season. Who will start at quarterback for the Okanagan Sun? Keith Zyla, who was their declared starter coming out of camp, he's healthy. He's ready to play by all accounts, everything I've heard. But Nick Wenman performed very well in relief over the last few weeks for this Sun team. Be interesting to see which way Ben McCauley goes, and you'll need to tune into the coaches show later this week. I'll be sure to ask him about that as well. This game, I think, will reveal a lot about the top three teams in the standings, and for me as well, as I will then have seen the Sun and the Raiders and the Rebels, and will give me a bit of a clear picture on who some of the real powerhouses are heading into the final half of this season. 2 o'clock, the start on that game at Caledonia Park, also on Saturday. Have you checked out BCFCTV.com yet? You probably should. It's a fantastic way to keep track of all the games as they're happening live, on demand. You can pause it, you can rewind it, watch your favorite play over again. It's a very nice feature, very easy to use. Or even better, get out and go see a BCFC game live. It doesn't even have to be your favorite team. You maybe aren't even that necessarily invested in a particular team, but fantastic talent on display, as I talked about off the top, and really something worth watching. Don't forget to follow the BCFC on their social media streams, Facebook and Twitter, to stay up to date with all of the fantastic content that is constantly going up at bcfootballconference.com. Enjoy Week 5, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we'll head into the bye week and take a bit of a rest before the final half of this season. For the BCFC, I'm Dominic Abassi.